Hi, everyone. This is Richard Carlton. I'm here with Mr.
Stephen Allen.
And Stephen's one of our senior engineers here at RC Consulting, and he frequently plays in the very deepest ends of the pool. And you randomly see him show up in some of our videos. And I go to Steve, I say, hey, what's your 10 most favorite custom functions? And someone like Steve will give me their perspective on their 10 most useful functions, which frequently will be different than maybe the 10 most favorite functions that I would use, because I'm a kind of guy that I do more lower and mid-level development. I'll do a little bit of high-end development, complex development, but my need for custom functions varies with the kind of work I do. I work with a lot of newer people, maybe not necessarily as technically deep with lots of SQL, NoDBC, and really hardcore PHP. I kind of leave that to my senior engineers to do because that's what they specialize in. So in this video, we're talking about the 10 most favorite custom functions, or approximately 10, right?
Well, yeah, you asked me originally for 5, and I spewed out like 12 of them or something.
Yeah.
All right.
So the idea is that what are useful to him? So understand that this is not my list. This is the list of a senior engineer who does a lot of hardcore development. So first off, let's talk about what is a custom function real quick. I mean, the 10-second overview. A custom function.
Okay, 10-second overview of a custom function. Basically, in FileMaker, you have the predefined functions like if and case and a couple others, a lot of others. But they also let you define your own. They say you can write your own function to use in the calculation editor.
Okay, cool. So the short version, this is a custom block of coding that once you set it up, you can recycle it a lot. Mm-hmm. In fact, there are some websites online where people can go and download and check out, all sorts of custom functions. A lot of them are junky, worthless custom functions.
But there's a lot of good stuff in the noise. There's a lot of signal in the noise. And so hopefully we'll give you a little bit of signal today and why that signal is important.
All right, so tell us about number 1 here. This is patternize.
Okay,
what
this
does
one
patternize
I actually wrote.
do?
What this does is I was having lots of use cases where I would have to mask out things and format things. So I was formatting phone numbers sometimes with extensions, sometimes without, sometimes international, sometimes not. And I was also doing a lot of masking various credit cards, and the use cases the clients wanted was not just you're going to put a bunch of X's, but they wanted to have the blocks. American Express card has different numbers in the blocks than a Visa card, for example. So what we have here with this example would be a pattern for a Visa card or a Discover or something with the 4 blocks of 4 pattern, right? And we would want to mask out the first 3 blocks and then put the numbers last 4 in, actually display those numbers. And so that's one potential pattern. Another one, and that one goes from right to left, so you're going to fill it in starting here and going that way, right? But maybe you want to go left to right with some of them. For phone numbers, for example, you would want to start here and work your way this way until you run out of numbers. Okay? So this one lets you do all of that in one function, and you specify what you want. You say, I'm going to go from left to right. I'm going to do this pattern. The character in that pattern that I want replaced with actual data is this character. And here's some of the data that I'm passing in, generated from another calculation. And I don't want to include the rest of the pattern once I run out of data.
Okay, so a 0 indicates that.
0 indicates that, and a 1 indicates that you do want to include it. So
okay, so if you were going to actually implement this, then you would take this block of code here, read the instructions here, and put that into your FileMaker solution using FileMaker Pro Advanced.
That's correct.
So that would be number 1. So let's move on to your next recommended function that you like, parse field name.
This one I also wrote. There are other people who have written similar ones. I wrote this one because it exactly met my constant use case. And what the constant use case for me in this is, if I'm writing an execute SQL statement, I want to specify a field to select or whatever, and I want to do it in a way that FileMaker is going to automatically update the name if I change the name later of the field. So if I'm doing an execute SQL statement and I just write it with a string, select whatever from whatever, where whatever equals whatever, right? That string is just a static string. FileMaker doesn't know what's in it. It doesn't know where the field names are. It doesn't know any of that. And if I change the name of a field that is referenced, I'm going to break that calculation. So I need to construct the string in such a way that FileMaker knows where the fields are and can update them if I change the field name later on, so I don't break my calculation every time I make a change to the database. This gives me a way to provide either the table name or the field name. So if I'm using it in the from part of the statement, I can grab the table just by passing a field. And what it does is it takes that field and reads out whichever one I tell it to read out, the table or the field, as a string. So then I can concatenate that into the rest of the string on the fly.
Cool. Very handy. All right. So moving along, number 3.
Number 3, extract data. This one, actually, the next 3, extract data, XML get, and XML replace node value, are all kind of a piece. They're XML manipulation functions, and particularly reading functions in the case of the first 2. The first 2 really do the same thing, but extract data gives me a little bit more functionality. It's just a little longer to type, and so what I usually do, and this one, by the way, was written, looks by somebody over at NRG, it looks like. It was posted by Michael Wallace, which is one of our colleagues here at RCC. Okay, so extract data and XML get both do the same thing. They let you pull data out of an existing XML structure using the node name of the value that you're trying to find. XML get does it for the first node name it comes across that matches. And that's useful most of the time, 99% of the time, that is the use case. For me, anyway. And it's shorter to write XML get, both in terms of you don't have to provide the instance number, and it's a shorter calculation name. So I usually use that one. In the 1% of the time where I have to extract a second or third instance of the same tag, the same node, that's when I use extract data and I explicitly specify the instance number. So this one, you only provide the XML and the tag name, and that's it. You don't have to worry about what instance you're on because it always takes the first instance.
Where did you specify the number?
Okay, the instance number is the third parameter. So in this one, it has the third parameter that XML get doesn't have. And so the first parameter and the second parameter are the same in both. It's the XML chunk and the tag you're looking for, or the node name you're looking for, to be specific. And the third parameter in this one is the instance of the node name. So to tell you what I'm talking about, if you have, for example, well, let's just use position. There's a position function in FileMaker. If you're looking for the character A in a string of text, and there's 3 A's in there, position makes you specify which one you're looking for.
Correct.
So this way acts the same way.
Cool. Very slick. All right, moving along. Then we have the XML replace node.
Let's go over that one.
Let's go over this.
XML replace node value is actually manipulating XML. Rather than just reading a value out, it lets you replace a value. So you say, here's my XML, here's my tag, just like the other 2. But within that tag, I want to take whatever's in it, strip it out, and put this in instead. So here's my example. If I have an XML node called name, and it has 2 child nodes called first and last. First is filled with my name, Stephen, and last name, Alan, same as mine. My dad's name is Randall. I want to switch that out. I say, give me the first tag and replace the value of it, which in this case is Stephen, with Randall. And so you can see in the output, it's name first, Randall, last Alan.
There you go. So that's handy for doing quick substitution, basically like substitution.
It's like substitute, but we're taking into account the node structure of the XML, yeah.
So yeah, but it reminds me of that. That's kind of cool. All right, so that's the first couple here. Then we're down to filter diff. Oh, yeah. Now, we were talking about this earlier, and this is really cool. I like this one. And some of these, I'm not a big SQL guy, so some of them have limited value for me, but this one is cool. How'd you describe this?
Okay.
You said the filter function is
one.
one.
What I said earlier. All right, so filter values is a built-in native FileMaker function, and what it does is it gives you, in technical terms, the intersection of of 2 sets. So what that means in layman's terms is you have 2 lists, and it gives you all of the values that are in both lists. So if you have a value that is in list A and in list B, it'll give you that value. If you have a value that's only in A or only in B, it won't give you that one.
And there's no option for that at all.
There's no option. That's the only functionality of the native function. It's called intersection of sets, and it gives you everything that's in both, but not in only one of them.
Right.
There is no option natively to FileMaker to give me everything that's in one and explicitly not in the other one. So if I want to strip out a bunch of values, say I have 4 or 5 values that I want to get rid of in this list, I have to either go through and manually remove them using some kind of replace function or, some kind of text manipulation and just parse it, and, it's really gnarly. Or I can call this and say, given this list, A, and given this other list, B, remove all of the values B from list A. And it gives me back the result. So here in our example, the first list is A, B, C, D, E. The second list is B, D, and F. I say, give me back from list A everything that's not in B, and I get back A, C, E.
Pretty cool. So yeah, kind of like an anti-filter function almost a little bit.
Yeah, in technical terms, it's the difference of sets. So if you want to look that up on Wikipedia.
Yeah. the sets, intersection of sets versus
difference.
Difference of sets.
Exactly.
Very cool. All right, moving along. We now have UUID decimal. And this one here is interesting. Normally when you see UUID, we get a string that looks like this, which has both alpha and numeric
correct,
characters.
As well as dashes. And it's basically a text string. And it's not a numerical value. What UUID decimal does, and I forget where I picked it up from. I think it's in the documentation of the actual thing. But UUID decimal basically generates a UUID, which if you're not sure what that is, Wikipedia can help. It generates a UUID that is a number and can be stored as a number. And that's the important part, is that you store it as a number and you gain all kinds of performance on it because it's way easier for FileMaker to index it and to store it, in fact, in a smaller form. So you don't spend nearly as much resources storing and indexing and finding as you do with a text-based one.
Yeah, on a small FileMaker solution, I could see this not being a relevant factor, but when you start dealing with gigabytes of data,
it makes a huge difference.
Yeah, it'll make a big difference.
So I tend to default to the UUI decimal on the assumption that, my work for my clients will make them successful.
Right. So you want that to be as fast. So this is actually a performance tip. Well, a lot of these could result in performance tips, but this one is explicitly designed as a performance improving tool.
Yeah, most of the ones we've gone over so far, in fact, all of the ones we've gone over so far are just shorthand for things you could do gnarly with some text manipulation stuff. And so it's development performance. You're developing a lot faster and a lot cleaner.
Yeah, less code.
Less code, easier to read, etc. This one is a straight up FileMaker performance enhancement.
Okay, great. Let's talk about some more basic ones. This is ones that I would expect to see on my list, right?
Well, this is an example of what I was just talking about shorthand, kind of developer shorthand that lets you code cleaner and faster and easier to read in the long run. And all this does, very simple. Returns character 9. ASCII character 9.
Yeah, which is now, I guess, called Unicode. But for those of you who are not technical, every character, every special character, every A, B, C, D, even a big A and a little a, they have a numeric representation, a number representation.
That's correct.
And so, like ASCII 13 is always a carriage return. It's one that's bolted into my head. I know that from back way before my FileMaker years. And that's been 27 years for me. So it goes way the hell back to, for me, junior high school. I learned that. So FileMaker has given us access to these characters, but remembering what character 9 is and looking at character 9 is a hassle. So he just...
and typing out character 9.
Yeah. And you have to remember 9. I remember 13. It's the only one I remember, which is a return.
Yeah. And there's an ancillary benefit that this is probably not going to activate in most circumstances, but it's something that could be useful. And that is an example of how a custom function in general can be useful. And so that's why I'm talking about it. If you have a tab function, and anywhere in your system that you want a tab, you call the tab function instead of typing character 9. And then suddenly the customer requirements change to where instead of a tab character, character 9, they want some other set of things. They want 5 spaces, for example, or they want, X, Y, Z, PDQ. It doesn't matter. They want something other than a tab character. Instead of having to go through and find every place in the entire system that has a freaking character 9,
you just change the custom function.
You just change the custom function.
Yeah.
And boom, it's done.
That's pretty slick. I like that one a lot. That one's more what I would call boss speed, right? In fact, both these make a lot of sense to me. The SQL ones, like I said, I could I try to stay away from SQL as long as I can. That's why I have senior engineers who like to play with that stuff. Now, we have indent and outdent. And I was like, what the hell is an outdent? And I said, that's like an anti-indent, right? So let's talk about this one. This is a fun one.
Okay. So actually, they are pairs of each other, and the equivalent functionality, if you were doing manual text editing in Word or something, you would select the text that you want to indent or outdent, and you would hit Tab or Shift-Tab for outdent. So that's basically what we're doing here, but we're doing it in a calculation. So you pass in, and it looks like a list. In fact, the first name of the first parameter is list, not value. Because if you think about what is text that has multiple lines, it's a list. That's all it is. You're saying I'm going to indent a list. That's how FileMaker treats it. It's actually just your string of text, but you want it to remember that it has lines and indent each line. You don't want it to just indent the first line and then, oh, oops.
Yeah. Now to be clear about this sample, it's a little misleading. And when I kind of did it me and Steve talked about these before shooting the video, and I was like, what the hell is this XX stuff, right? Normally an indent is these 5 spaces or whatever.
Tab or 5 spaces.
Whatever they are.
Yeah.
Right. So normally that would be spaces there, but he put X's here so you could clearly see what was going on. And then I said, well, why not just put the field, the value hello, it's 5 spaces and an ampersand and make a concatenated string together. It has the spaces and the hello. And at a very simple level, this sample is so simple that it almost like doesn't explain the usefulness. The usefulness is if you had a bunch of text up here, then you were going to insert a list. Once again, Steve said list, but that's really the operative benefit here.
It's multi-line text is what it is.
Multi-line text is that then you run a command here that gets a related list of related records and a value, and then it indents all those items.
Yeah, the function doesn't care how the list is constructed. You can pass it in as, just text string like this, or you can pass it in as there's several different text and list manipulation functions, both in FileMaker and in every custom function list ever, that can be used to generate the text that gets passed in. And that's the power of it. It doesn't care where the list comes from. It can come from wherever, including the already powerful native functions.
Very cool. So that's where this benefit comes in. For simple single things or 2 or 3 things, it makes no sense. But when you're writing a big, long string, it becomes especially powerful. In fact, Steve said he was using this a lot with XML to indent the XML properly so it could be easily visually read and inspected, correct?
Yeah, that's in fact the whole use case for me that generated me writing this function in the first place.
So if you wonder about like XML, you see blocks of XML string, good coding, this stuff starts to indent as you insert nodes, right, into the XML.
Any child nodes are indented one over from their parent. And then their values, if it's well written, are either all on one line or are indented one over from the node that they're a value of.
Right.
If they're on separate lines.
Exactly. So the whole idea is that this allows us to actually create the XML and have it not be in a vertical list, make it very readable, human readable is what I would say.
That was important because I was doing a lot of XML composition and reading and debugging those scripts. I was like, okay, I need a quick and dirty way and actually clean way, if the output is clean, to keep this formatting straight as I'm going up and down the list and generating. This is a rather gnarly script, actually, that was almost 100 lines long. This was one thing I didn't need to worry about, was being able to read my output.
Cool.
And so I spent 15 minutes, wrote this thing, and that's the end of the story.
So I guess I should say that outdent works the opposite way. I refer to it as the anti-indent, but it's going back to the left.
It takes whatever indents exist that match the criteria you specify and gets rid of them. So you're popping everything out to the left. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's that way. All right. So then the last one we have, we're probably going to do a separate video on because we want to probably dig down into it a little deeper. But since it's on Steve's top 10 list of useful custom functions for FileMaker, we wanted to just mention here briefly. And that is this whole idea. If you write a lot of scripts and you're passing parameters back and forth between scripts. So the idea is that you call a script and you pass it a parameter. The analogy I like to use to explain to people what we're talking about is that you're on a football field and you're going to throw the football to the receiver. You're going to pass control from you're the quarterback and you're the script that's running, and you're going to send control of the ball to the receiver, another script. If you could take a Post-it note and tape it on the ball and write a note, I hate you, and throw it to the receiver.
The note might be something like go left instead of right?
Oh, yeah, go left instead of right. Yeah. Then the receiver would get the note, and they would have control, and you would have passed them this message. And so that's what these parameters, script parameters, are all about. Very simple analogy.
Yeah, very simple. So the question is, do you want to pass multiple notes?
Yeah, like
not only do you go left, but your shoe's untied.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's 2 notes, right?
And you're making more money than I am as a receiver.
And I hate you.
And I hate you.
So there's
so if you had
like 4 notes there, and they all on separate Post-it notes. Well, in the way native FileMaker passes parameters, you can't do that. What you're passing in native FileMaker get script parameter is a string. That's all. It's just a string. You can put all those different notes into it, but then you got to figure out how you put them in and how to read them back out and all that. This is a set of functions that does that for you.
Right. And so what we're going to do is we're going to shoot another video, but the short version is this is in Steve's opinion, the simplest way to pass multiple notes.
By far.
From FileMaker script to FileMaker script.
Yes.
Now, he uses a different technique if he's talking to PHP,
From PHP.
From PHP.
The reason being that PHP doesn't understand the underlying mechanism that this uses, which I'm not going to get into in this video. What PHP understands and easily talks to is XML. And that's
we're
what
back
I
to that.
used to do.
Yeah. In
when I
fact,
was
we have other
passing
videos
multiple
on that
things.
somewhere.
I do have other videos.
So
the
if you're
reason
watching,
I used to use XML and I use this now is that XML is very verbose and there's a lot of typing involved. And there's not so much. It's very easy. It's very simple. You just tag it, value it, and you're done. There's not a lot of, did I forget that closing tag, and blah, blah, blah. It's just a lot of BS, frankly, that goes away.
Okay. So this is Steve's top 10 list of super useful custom functions that you use all the time.
Right. And to understand where these came from, I use them all the time. I needed them. I wrote them. Most of them. There's some of them I borrowed because they were already written. But for the most part, like about half of them, I wrote.
Yeah.
And it's because I use them all the time, and they are so useful. That's why they're there.
And of course, if you're another FileMaker Ace senior developer and you've written similar sorts of custom functions,
sure they have.
Yeah, they have.
These are so useful. I would not doubt that probably all the ones I wrote, and maybe some more, are already existing in someone else's list as some other function. I just wasn't able to find it or didn't look long enough.
Right. Now, one of the handy places to find the functions is, I want to point out, Brian Dunning's website is probably the biggest repository of custom functions.
It is the biggest one as far as I know. He has a great site, great interface, and it's a very active community. The one that, of course, we've linked here is FM Functions. It's kind of a competitor community, but they're not really competition. You can use either one. They're not incompatible with each other.
And they're basically totally free. So everything here is free. It's not something that's for sale.
And just to be clear, Brian Dunning's site is briandunning.com.